Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back one of our Out to Innovate co-chairs, T.J. Ronigan.
All right. Thank you, and welcome everyone to our final session of the day. This will be a panel discussion and an open forum for your questions, which hopefully all of the previous workshops have questions just bubbling in your head. We have called this session Out and Accomplished, and it will focus on what it means to be an out and successful professional or ally in the STEM world. Joining us as the moderator for today's panel is Dr. Mary Yuhas. Mary is the recently appointed Associate Vice President for Gender Initiatives in Science, Technology, Engineering, Mathematics, and Medicine at The Ohio State University. Mary facilitates the recruitment, retention, and promotion of women faculty members from diverse populations in STEM disciplines with a goal to increase the presence and success of women in those fields. She also holds the appointment of Clinical Associate Professor in the Department of Materials Science and Engineering. And prior to joining Ohio State, Mary served a 2-year rotation as the inaugural Program Director for Diversity and Outreach in the Directorate for Engineering at the National Science Foundation. Mary has also held engineering research positions at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and the Edison Welding Institute. An extraordinarily accomplished woman, Mary is so invested in academia, she also married a professor, Dr. John Leopold of Ohio State's Welding and Engineering program. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mary Yuhas.
So our first panelist in Out and Accomplished today is Dr. Ron Buck Mire. Ron was born in the Caribbean island of Grenada. He went to primary school in the US, secondary school in Barbados, and earned his bachelor's, master's, and PhD from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in beautiful Troy, New York. Actually, Troy's not beautiful. My husband went there, so I can say that. He's been on the faculty at Occidental College in Los Angeles since 1994. He's been the chair of math during that tenure. So I am going to just bring Dr. Buck Mire up to the stage right now, and we'll let him tell the rest. Please join me in welcoming Ron Buck Mire. Welcome.
Thank you.
So what would you like to tell the audience this afternoon about you?
I guess I'll do a sort of short version. I have a 45-minute talk that I give around called A Black Gay Math Department Chair, How I Got Here from There. And you started talking about it, that I grew up in the Caribbean, so I'm a black gay immigrant. That I was born in Grenada. I ended up at Occidental College. I went to RPI. Yeah, the beautiful and for Troy, New York is in quotes. It's a bit of a joke. And I came out in graduate school. Immediately while I was there, I was one of those people that when I came out, I immediately sort of became a openly gay student senator, and I started running the Lgbt group, which at an engineering institution, at least back in this was in the very early 90s, was one of the most marginal groups on campus. And since I was, even then, a black gay graduate student, even at RPI, they were starting to think about diversity. And so I was, drafted or encouraged to be on many, many, many different diversity committees, because you could say, oh, we get so many slots at the same time by having Ron on the committee. We get the black, we get the gay, we get math, which is sort of also slightly marginalized on an engineering institution. So I've often sort of had to represent multiple parts of identity simultaneously. And so another interesting thing about being multiply identified, being black and gay, being a minority within a minority, is I really like the fact that being here at Out to Innovate, that we had such a panel. We had a panel like that, minority within a minority, at the 2010 Out to Innovate, then it was very small, and actually I was very happy to see that this year's panel, this year's attendees at the session was 3 times as large as it was at the last one. And we had a really interesting conversation among us about the different ways that race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation can combine while still talking about it in a STEM context.
You know, one thing that I've noticed in just reading your bio is that you show a lot of natural leadership. You created the Queer Resources Directory. You are the founder of the Barbara Jordan Bayard Rustin Coalition, one of the few Black LGBT political advocacy organizations. These are things that you've chosen to do, all this advocacy, but this is natural leadership that you've shown. So you were able to assimilate the fact that you have this multiple identity and run with it and make it available and accessible to people who could identify with any one of those. That's pretty cool.
Well, thank you. I think it's related to having the multiple identities and having to negotiate the world as it is from different perspectives, and honestly wishing the world were different, and realizing, well, it's not different right now, and I can't really wait for someone else to help make it different, so I guess I'll work on it myself. And I like working on issues that combine multiple issues at the same time. That's why it's Black LGBT political advocacy. I'm also on the board of directors of Immigration Equality, which does immigration and sexual orientation. I'm also the board of directors of the Center for Health Justice, which does health disparities in the criminal justice system. So I always work on issues that are sort of multiple at the same time.
And now you have a national perch because you're a program director in the Division of Undergraduate Education at the National Science Foundation, which is great.
Yes.
So
it's really interesting because you really get to see from a bird's eye view what are the innovations that are bubbling up around the country and which ones should be supported at a larger stage thanks to independent, unbiased, anonymous peer review.
That's right. That's right. Well, good. So we'll continue that on in a few minutes. Next, I'd like to bring to the stage Lynn Conway. Lynn is Professor Emerita of Electrical and Computer Engineering and Computer Science at the University of Michigan. She comes to us from a retired position right now. She was elected into the National Academy of Engineering for her work, which she'll talk about. This is the highest professional recognition that an engineer can receive. And I am so honored to be sitting on the stage with a female member of the National Academy of Engineering. I can't even tell you. Right now, Lynn lives this idyllic life that I'm completely jealous of. She lives with her husband, Charlie, who's also an engineer, and their 4 cats on a 23-acre homestead in rural Michigan. They've been together for over 25 years. Please help me welcome Lynn Conway. Lynn, please share with us.
Yes, maybe I could tell you a little bit about my background. But first, it's just wonderful to be here with you today. This is a really special event. I think we all sense it now. So it's just great. And as someone who transitioned a long, long time ago, think back way before the Stonewall riots, back in the mid-'60s. I'm hoping I can help with perspectives, perhaps, on where we've been and how far we've come and where things might be headed. Because I have sort of the long view on that. And I feel a little funny being an elder, I'm not sure how to deal with that, actually, because I don't feel like an elder, but that's another story. But first, a little bit about me. I received my MSEE degree at Columbia University in New York City back in 1963. That's a ways back. And I was recruited by IBM Research at Yorktown Heights in a support role. I became the person who was responsible for building the simulation model of a new advanced supercomputer that was in development there. And in a big surprise to everyone, including me, I solved an open question in computer architecture at the time. Namely, figured out how to issue more than one instruction in each machine cycle, even out of order, in a serial high-performance computer. It made a big improvement in machine performance. Now, what's interesting, I had done that work, and sort of in the process became a part of the inner architecture group for this advanced machine. A very secretive project that had been started by T.J. Watson Jr. himself, who wanted to get into the supercomputer business. But by 1968, I had to tell IBM's personnel department that I was undergoing a gender transition. I was one of Harry Benjamin's patients, actually one of his later patients about at the end of his career. And I desperately hoped to keep my job, but the news rocketed up to the corporate executive committee. You have to think of the old IBM, not the new IBM, not the way it is now. Anyway, and of course to the CEO, T.J. Watson Jr., and they fired me. And amazingly, right around that same time, that project got in political difficulties and began to implode. And Watson, soon after, decided to get out of the supercomputer business because of concerns about monopolistic charges against IBM. In any event, there I found myself without a job, kind of out there, you know, with a Volkswagen and a suitcase full of stuff, and that was about all I had by then, because I'd been spending a lot of money working on the transition. So I had really very little resources. And also, this work that I'd done and the whole project I'd worked on, which wasn't known much about by anybody even within IBM, imploded. And so it's sort of like everything evaporated. If you can sort of imagine, it was quite strange. But anyway, I was, I guess you call a gritty survivor. I had to be, and I quickly completed my transition and started my career all over again in stealth mode, as we called it then, where you try to keep it all a big secret in a new identity. You just pop up this new person. And managed to find a job as a contract programmer to kind of get on the ladder again. And but I was so happy and full of life, and I became very productive in my work. And amazingly, it was long before I was able to get a job as a computer architect at Memory Corporation when Memoryx was first getting in the computer business. And then, in a great stroke of luck, I found myself recruited by Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, the later to be world famous place, but I got on board there just as it was getting started. And it was while I was there that I stumbled into the work I became well known for, which is methods, innovating methods that made it much, much easier for the average digital designer to design silicon chips. And at the time, this was a highly arcane art. Only a few people were participating in the design of microprocessors, for example. Almost no one knew how it was done. Anyway, I wrote a book about this with my colleague Carver Mead at Caltech, and it blew out into the world, and it basically started a revolution in chip design. It kind of got a lot of stuff going in Silicon Valley in the 1980s. If you're interested, if you're ever interested, I've actually just finally written a memoir about that work that's going to be published in IEEE Solid State Circuits magazine next month. And, you know, kind of finally sort of telling the inside story about that. But going back to that time, that work opened many doors. I went on to do a tour at DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And even then, by having been honest at least with the HR departments when I hired in job to job, I told them about my medical history, We kept it quiet and confidential, but I hadn't lied or misrepresented anything anywhere along the line. So I was able to breeze through the security clearance process back in 1983. Got a top secret clearance way back then. And then after that, I joined University of Michigan as professor of ECS and associate dean of engineering. But here's where the story gets kind of interesting. You know, I'd just been in stealth all those years, continued on, basically up to about the time I was going to retire. And then something happened. In 1998, I got on the internet, which was then available. I put some words in there, dynamic instruction scheduling, which was the name of this invention I'd made decades before at IBM. And it turned out by then it had gotten into the Intel Pentiums and some other microprocessors. You know, the work in VLSI, the work in microelectronics, had made it possible to put what in '65 was a supercomputer by '95 onto a chip. And so this thing had the later work had helped the earlier work finally get going, but people didn't know where this had come from, like who had done this stuff. So now I was really in trouble because there was a professor down at Clemson University who's become a good friend, a computer scientist there who had done a lot of teaching based on early architectures to teach a student about the flow of architectural ideas. He had backtracked this stuff and traced it down to this old project. I was trying to figure out what happened on that project. There was nothing written about it. There were very few artifacts left. Well, but he knew this is where it had come from, or suspected it. Turned out I had saved a lot of my early work, my notes, my papers, and everything. When they fired me, they didn't give me an exit interview. So I never even gave back any of the stuff I had. I just kept it all. Well, anyway, I needed to come out about this, but I needed to protect my family name. I had a different name than my Catholic family, extended family, you can imagine. You know, broken relations with a lot of them. And so I came out to him and helped him understand this whole project. And at the same time, I gradually became coming out on the internet to my colleagues and with my story, hoping that times had changed and maybe some would understand. And that kind of went okay. So there I was in 1999, actually coming out. And it was very hard for me after all those years in stealth to have to deal with all that. But that's been remarkable because since then, I got a lot of feedback from transgender people on the information I'd put on there, met many people via the internet, went to some of the gender conferences, and I began adding trans advocacy information to my site. So there's a group of sites in the early 2000s through the mid-2000s where there was a lot of gathering of information, and I helped play some role in that. I had my site translated into many languages and became known in a lot of other countries around the world. So this was a really rewarding experience for me to be able to share in my life and see it help other people out there. And I think this has just been a wonderful experience. It would never have happened if I hadn't basically been sort of forced to take that step. And so I wonder for a lot of folks here, what steps have brought you here, and what others out there can you help bring out and share your story. So really what it is all, in this twist of fate here again, this technology I'd worked on all those years is what finally launched me out into transgender advocacy, if you can parse that. And really in time to catch this wave we're on right now, where more and more of us are coming out and showing the world who we are.
Thank you very much. I actually have a colleague who was mentored by you through her transition. You didn't know that, did you?
No, I didn't.
So now we're going to move on to Nergis Mavalvala, from whom we heard at lunchtime. We heard about cushions and bowling balls and mirrors and 10 to the minus 18th meters. Can't even get my head around that. So Nergis will join us next. We know that she has a BA from Wellesley College and a PhD from MIT. She postdoced at Caltech. I'm kind of flying through this because we heard a lot about this, and we're going to hear more from her when she joins us. And we heard when she got the call in 2010 from MacArthur for her Genius Award. So let's welcome now Nergis to the stage. And she comes bounding up the stage, up to the stage. So Nergis, please.
Surely you don't want to hear any more from me. I have very little else to add to my own story. I did miss out, as Victoria reminded me, I missed out telling you about grades 3 to 5, so maybe I'll go there next. No, but really, I think one of the things Mary asked us to do is to think about something that would be interesting for young people to know. Since this is the out and accomplished panel. So I think for me that the things that have been most important in reaching this place in my life is luck. I never underestimate that. I can, when I need to, work my tail off. That has been helpful. Mentors, and of course family. We all have precarious relationships with our families around our homosexuality and other things, that in other ways in which we might please or displease them. But those are the important sort of props in my life. So I'll stop there and let someone else take the stage.
Thank you. We'll be back. Next, we're going to welcome to the stage Frank O'Brien Bernini. He is the Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer at Owens Corning, where he's been for 29 years. And they're just not too far away from here in Granville, Ohio. His purview includes global accountability for the company's sustainability development and implementation, including environmental health and safety. He's held, during his tenure at Owens Corning, several positions, leadership positions, including most recently the Vice President and Chief R&D Officer. So Frank is currently the executive sponsor for Owens Corning's GLBT Affinity Group, and he's an active advocate in GLBT matters. He is an alumnus of one of the nation's first interdisciplinary sustainability programs. This is the Center for Resourceful Living at North Adams State College. He went on to earn both a BS and MS in mechanical engineering from UMass. Which UMass?
UMass Amherst.
UMass Amherst, where his research focus was on solar energy. So please join me in welcoming Frank.
Thanks, Mary, and thanks, Amy, for having me. Thanks for the Out to Innovate conference for inviting all of us to spend some time with you. So maybe I'll talk a little bit about my history. I am an advocate / ally, and I've been the executive sponsor for our internal Owens Corning GLBTA affinity group for several years now. So let me roll back, because one of the things that I find comforting when I speak to students is to talk a little bit about how sort of non-linear your path can be through a professional career, through an academic career, and just maybe some comfort in knowing that you actually don't have to know what the next step is along the way to have an awesome career and an awesome life. So let me talk a little bit about my background. So as Mary said, I went directly out of high school to become a biology student. And after about one semester in biology, it became pretty crystal clear to me that that wasn't particularly interesting to me. And I pretty much quit school. So here I'm, one semester out of school, and I dropped out. Immediately began working in a restaurant, and pretty much figured out that that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do either. So I began studying kind of on my own this new emerging area of solar energy, and so this was in the 1970s. So this was kind of like the first solar revolution. Maybe the first solar revolution is when folks lived in caves and realized that you could face caves south and warm up. So maybe that was the first solar revolution. So this was maybe the second solar revolution. And I got very interested in that. And as you can imagine, sort of a dropout biology major, I thought it would be worth getting to know this technology a little bit. So there was a new program starting up at the same school that I had just dropped out of. It is now called the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts. It used to be called North Adams State College. And it was a program, this sustainability program. And I kind of started to learn a little bit about what this was. It was, I talk about it being perhaps the first in the world that was put together as a sustainability program. It wasn't called sustainability back then. I don't think the term was kind of related in the way it is now to economic, environmental, and social, kind of in the way it is today. But at that time, it was kind of called resourceful living. It was called the Center for Resourceful Living. And it was a multidisciplinary between the physics department and the history department. And so in steps, a couple of my very early mentors that put together this program. And their whole idea with this program, which was a pretty revolutionary idea at the time, was that we could solve some of the most difficult problems in the world if you got a diverse group of people. Imagine, at that time, the physics department, how more analytical can you get than that? And sort of the history or anthropology department. And that's kind of a study of how people live and cultures, and kind of mash these together and create what was at that time called the Center for Resourceful Living. And so there was everything from organic gardening, farming, to renewable resources, blending this social science and kind of the hard sciences. And that really got my juices going around the engineering side of this. And so in that, I would, going back to my first point, I had no idea when I dropped out or even when I went into biology that was kind of the next step. So I got very interested in the solar energy part of that, started a small solar design build firm. So again, second time dropped out of school. Started this, met my wife, who happens to be sitting right over here, Mary Rose. And so if you wonder about the name, O'Brien Bernini, we put our name together when we got married. She was the O'Brien, I was the Bernini, so we had a little Irish and Italian thing going. So still 1978. The next thing that I saw was an opportunity to really get deeper into this area of engineering, to understand solar energy a little bit more. So re-entered again into school, this time at the University of Massachusetts, and went on for my undergraduate and then graduate master's degree in mechanical engineering and focused on solar energy. And at that time, I had a fellowship that was sponsored by Owens Corning. So Owens Corning in Ohio, all I knew about Ohio was that it was kind of a flyover state between the East Coast and the West Coast.
18 electoral votes.
Yes, yeah. It wasn't back then. Yeah, that's very, I was going to use malarkey at some point in this panel, but very good, Mary. So yeah, it's for many years been a flyover state, and now it's a pretty important state. And it's a lot of fun living here, actually. So I joined Owens Corning. I loved what I saw there, the Science and Technology Center. Some of the folks that are here spent some time with us yesterday at the research center here, and we appreciate you spending some time with us. So it's an awesome company. So I've moved up through the ranks, started as a development engineer, moved on to be sort of a leader, multiple different leadership positions, to my final position in research and development was the chief R&D officer. But along the way, I had a very interesting experience and one that I think is really important for you as you look for what your next step is. And that's that we inside our company, so I was on the CEO's executive team, we got an alert that we had, as a company, had scored somewhere in the 50s, I think 56 or something like that, on this survey that none of us had even ever heard about. And it was the Human Rights Campaign Equality Index, Corporate Equality Index. And so this was in the early 2000s, maybe one of their early reports where they really brought in a lot of companies. We had really very little idea what this was all about. We had, at that time, a GLBT affinity group that was kind of really just a personal encouragement and support group. It wasn't really a business-focused group to drive change in our company. It was more a personal support group. And so I stepped up and I said, I'm going to try to figure out what this is all about. You know, certainly for those that are in the sciences and math going through school, if you ever get a 56% on some test that matters, you have one of two things to do: drop out of school, which I had some experience with, or second, decide to do something about it. So I stepped up and became the executive sponsor of our GLBT affinity group, and we got about trying to understand what that meant. And one of the things that struck me with that was that these surveys, whether they're the HRC Equality Index or the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, there are a handful of surveys that are more priceless to companies and to universities, I think, than a handful of consultants. Because the gift that they give you is kind of a list of what matters. And you don't have to do a lot of research around it. You can look and say, you know, we don't give partner benefits. That's why we got, you know, a 0 here. How can we fix that? There was no strategic reason why we didn't. It was just we didn't. We didn't understand. We didn't think it was important. We didn't know it was important. And so we began moving against that. And then for the last 6 years, I'm proud to say we've scored 100%. The last year was a really tough one. It was a really tough one for companies because in the last session, if you're familiar with the Equality Index measures, it required companies to give transgender transition support, medical support for that. That was a really tough one. And I'm really proud of our company that we stepped up and decided to do that and made that move. So with that, I would just say, as you're figuring out sort of what's next for you and you're looking at companies, that is certainly one measure, the HRC Corporate Equality Index, that will help you get an insight into the culture and the behaviors that are going on inside the company that you may be looking to join. So maybe with that, I'll stop and we'll have some chance to talk about several of these areas.
Thank you very much, Frank. And now we're going to fill our final empty slot down there with Professor Victoria Orphan. She is Professor of Geobiology in the Department of Geological and Planetary Sciences at Caltech. She's been there since 2004. Her research spans the fields of environmental microbiology, ecology, biogeochemistry. That's 3 different departments when I was growing up, right? Now it's in one person's work. I love this. And her research focuses primarily on microbial cycling of methane. She studies microbial life on the planet, specifically in understanding the cooperative partnerships formed between environmental microorganisms and their impact on global biogeochemical cycles. She did her PhD at University of California, Santa Barbara, and was the National Research Council postdoc fellow at NASA Ames Research Center. In 2011, she received the Presidential Early Career Award in Science and Engineering, PCASE. This is a big deal. You go to the White House, you shake the man's hand. This is a very big deal. And she was awarded the 2012 Young Investigators Prize by the International Society of Microbial Ecology for her contributions. In her free time, she enjoys playing guitar, hanging out with her dog, scuba diving with her partner. Please join me in welcoming Victoria to the stage.
Hi. Well, thank you all for spending some time with us. I'd like to say that my career path has been a little unusual. So people have talked about these non-linear trajectories. I've known that I've wanted to be involved in ocean sciences and oceanography since I was about 6. I don't know why. Maybe it had to do with growing up near the beach in San Diego, but I was really drawn to the ocean and environmental issues at a very young age, and started doing biology early on and got totally hooked on it. I chose to go to UC Santa Barbara because it gave me a chance to continue my research in marine science, and sort of unlike my science path, my personal life was a little more complicated. So I actually didn't realize that I was a lesbian until I was in graduate school. I just thought I was a very talented softball player, straight softball player all the way through. And really in graduate school, I met this wonderful woman who's now my wife, Shauna Gofretti, and she was also a graduate student at the time. And so we've had this really fortunate ability to sort of navigate our professional and personal lives together for over about 15 plus years now. So we feel really quite blessed, I think, in being able to be in the same place and doing the same kind of research, both pursuing our independent careers. So when I was an undergraduate, I had the opportunity to do some research in a couple of labs. So the first one was a macroecology lab, which entailed going into salt marshes and tagging fish with acrylic paint. So I got really good at working a hypodermic needle and marking and releasing fish. And I really thought that I was going to be a macroecologist. And it wasn't until my senior year I took an elective course in microbial ecology. So there was a new professor. His name was Ed DeLong. He was a sort of up-and-coming microbial ecology superstar. And he was teaching a course, and I had a free elective, so I took it and got totally hooked and realized that microorganisms really were where it was at. And if you cared about environmental issues, that this was a really good field to get into. And so at this point, I'm close to graduation. I've had one class in microbiology, and so what do? Do you jump into a graduate career right away, or how do you navigate that? And so I ended up taking a year off and worked as a technician in microbial ecology to try to see if this really was what I wanted to do and invest my time in as a graduate student. And it turned out that I still loved it quite a bit and started applying for schools and ended up going back to UC Santa Barbara, working with this same amazing professor because he offered me basically total freedom to do a thesis project in an area that I was really passionate about, and that was looking at oil and its effects on microbial remediation in deep petroleum reservoirs. And anybody who's been to California knows there's a lot of petroleum oil derricks right off the coast there, so it's a really neat, you can do research right in your backyard. And so that sort of fueled my interests, and then a little bit of serendipity and luck came into play. So my partner was a little ahead of me in the graduate career, and she was looking at postdocs and was going to go up to the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute for a postdoc, and it just so happened that my advisor was courted by that same institution, and so I was able to go up there and finish my graduate career while she started a postdoc. And so we were able to continue to work together as an out couple in the Institute. And there I got to work in deep sea microbiology, and it's a really wonderful place where you can basically be a chief scientist on research cruises even as a graduate student. So we were able to go out and run robotic submersibles to collect samples in the deep canyon there. And from then on, I was completely hooked, and also realized that you needed to bring in other disciplines to really, truly understand the ecosystem. So I started to learn more about geology at that time, geochemistry, and just as much as I've appreciated diversity in my personal life, I've realized that my professional life also benefits quite a bit by having diversity of disciplines that you can pull together in new and innovative ways. So because I started merging these different disciplines together, this actually positioned me quite well for faculty positions right out the gate. And so there was a new field called geobiology. I didn't know I was becoming and training to be a geobiologist, but I was some of the first of the trainee geobiologists coming out of a graduate program, and that made me very marketable for positions. And so I was able to go to Caltech and join their geobiology group at the Department or Division of Geological and Planetary Sciences. And I've been there since 2004, and got tenure a couple of years ago. I continue to do work. I really enjoy the Caltech environment because it allows you to really bring together a lot of different creative techniques and talents across campus. And so I'd say that's one of the secrets to my success, I think, is looking for those opportunities and making those connections wherever you can in new and innovative ways. So.
Thank you. You know, I'm reminded there's so much brain power over here on this side of the stage, right, to my left. Something to think about. When there's a natural disaster or some structure fails or something like that, and CNN and all the cable news, and they've got the experts, right? I'm one of those people that writes to them and says, where are the women? Where are the minorities? Where are the GLBT people? Don't forget about that. If you have the opportunity, I mean, these people are all qualified experts in the field. Why shouldn't they be interviewed on TV and their opinions put online? So think about that as you move through your lives, your careers. It's been stuck in my craw for a while. So here's what we're going to do. We've got about 10 or 15 minutes where I'm going to just quickly, I'm going to ask a few questions, and then I'd really like you folks to come up and interact. We've got a couple of open mics here. So because there are 5 of you, I'm going to shoot one question, and let's just see how we do on this. So what is your strategy for moving forward when there are bumps in the road, especially when those bumps are beyond your control? What can you share about how you overcame bumps? So I'm going to randomly, instead of going down the row, I'm going to pick on somebody. Frank, you're looking like you're locked and loaded.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we talked about, Mary, when we were prepping for this is to bring in, the idea of mentors and stuff like that. So I've got a good little story that maybe can speak to that, and also, created a change or an insight in my life that has been very important for my career. And that's that very early on in my career at Owens Corning, it's not unusual in either an academic environment or sort of an R&D environment to sort of stew and I will say complain about another area where, it might be manufacturing if you're an R&D guy, it might be some collaboration that you've got with another department on a project or something like that. And one of the things that I found, and this is kind of like, blowing through a bump in the road, is that one of my very first mentors, and he was actually my boss's boss at the time, I was in his office one day and kind of complaining, I guess. You know, in hindsight, I would call it complaining. It was a big project that I was running, and I was kind of saying, you know, the manufacturing guys, they just don't get it. You know, we're trying to do this, and they're not helpful, and they're blah, blah, blah. And I don't think they're aligned with us and all that. And I still remember, like, just seeing his face, and this is back when speaker phones, way before FaceTime and Skype, and he hit the speaker phone and he said, we'll call him. And we'll call him and see what he has to say. And that was first a shock, because this is a plant manager, I'm a lowly engineer, and my boss's boss is going to connect directly with the plant manager and have a conversation about my concern, and basically grill him and see whether we're aligned or not. And that set up, and it's something that I've mentored a lot of people that have worked for me through the years, that if there's a barrier, if there's something you're stewing about, if there's something that just doesn't feel right, don't, you know, do an email, don't, you know, complain to your team, to your friends. Go right at the area that you think you're not aligned with, no matter where they are in the organization, no matter where the inside, outside, that there's no progress in, you know, little groups kind of complaining about the situation or the circumstance, when you can go directly to whoever it is or whatever it is that's in the way and take it head on, because, you know, it might be surprising, it might be kind of just, you may say, of course that's true, but, you know, almost always everyone that's involved with a project or some initiative, some team that you're working on, has in fact the same goal. So if you can come from, look, we're all trying to get here, there's just some bump in the road or some misunderstanding or something in the way, but if you can talk about where you're heading together, then you can blow through those. So
good advice. So go to the decision maker. So now, because there are 4 people left and we've got about 10 minutes, you guys are good at math, right? So we're gonna keep these kind of quick. So we'll kind of quickly go through. Lynn, why don't you go next, please?
Well, I was just thinking that an experience a lot of people will have in engineering careers, say in industry, is that you might work on one project after another, and then they get canceled or it doesn't go to market, and you moved off on another project. This is very common because in a competitive world, especially in high technology areas, you may even have several development teams working at the same time on what's going to be a particular product. And management just looking to see which one of those is most promising, going to go, which clicks, and so forth. And so there's the issue of how you deal with a succession of failures or apparent failures. And this will happen. And I mentioned in my own career, project gets canceled. I got fired. That was a different deal. But the project was canceled. A lot of people felt very hurt by that. At Memorex, I was a computer architect. Then Memorex got out of the computer business. Then I ended up at PAR. So until I actually did the work that turned out to be the work I'd be known for, I just gone through one failure as far as projects after another. What I didn't realize at the time, and I didn't realize actually until I started writing a memoir and really digging back in and reflecting on everything, is it was at the IBM project that I learned the very things I needed to do when time came to do how to design chips in new ways. You see, I had gotten passionately involved in that project on a bunch of stuff, won't bore you with the details, but I was learning along the way. So if you get on projects and you find them at least exciting, even if they may not pan out, you know, go for it. Do everything you can, learn what you can, and I'll bet you that's gonna be what you use down the line, especially teamwork and getting things going with other people. So it's a matter of learning it, and you're just in position, so when you do strike goals sometime, you really go for it.
That's great. Great advice. Who would like to go next? Ron. Bump in the road. Get over it.
Right. I've been trying to think of a response to this, and really, it's sort of related to what Lynn is saying, is that sometimes it'll just become an opportunity. You know, you think that, oh no, this is the worst possible thing that could possibly have happened, and another door will open up that you would not have noticed, and you might even end up in a better place you would have been if you'd actually gotten that first thing. So the bump in the road stopped what you had envisioned as was going to be your sort of forward future path, and because that doesn't happen, some other opportunity comes up. So I think one of the things to do is sort of don't panic. I mean, that life is not linear. Life is not linear, and so when a bump in the road happens, you know, swerve.
You thought it was going there, but don't panic when it does.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Victoria, what about you? Anything?
So there was a English proverb quote that I saw one of the other speakers use, and that was, "Smooth seas does not a skillful mariner make," or something like that. And you know, I think there's going to be challenges inevitably in people's lives, and it's what makes us stronger and more resilient. And for me, the bumps are usually not getting a grant funded or having a paper rejected, and usually that's something experienced with my postdocs and students together. And so the way that we handle situations like that is to really look at the weaknesses and positive components of the grant and really try to move forward and learn from it. And so I'll keep it short and end there, yeah.
And what did the reviewers say, maybe to learn from that right, of the proposal?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in many cases reviews provide good, positive criticism and constructive information. Occasionally you have some nasty reviewers, and those you also use as a teaching moment to teach what not to do in a review. But we really go through it point by point and try to point out the good things and the things that we need to improve upon before resubmitting. So I think it's a good experience to bring in, again, other people's perspectives on your work outside the lab.
Good advice. Nergis, what about you?
So the only thing I can add to what everybody's already said is if it's a technical bump in the road, I mean, so the main thing is to seek counsel, to think about who is it that knows something about this, and can I consult with them. So when I have technical problems, I think of my students, my colleagues. If it's an interpersonal problem, I'm married to the most brilliant psychologist and interpersonal manager, so I seek wise counsel from her. So really looking out to other people who may know something more about the issue than you do or have a different perspective. So.
And sometimes that's hard, isn't it? Because you know what might be coming might not be.
Especially if she's your partner.
Honesty, huh?
Yeah,
right. Well, great. Well, thanks to all of you for that. I'd like to open up the two mics to people who have questions, comments, and you're not allowed to speak unless you tell us your name and your affiliation. Very important.
Gail Gibson with DuPont.
All right.
For the panel, you're quite distinguished and accomplished. Who are your LGBT role models?
I can start, I guess, and I'll embarrass her. Actually, Shelley is one of my role models, and she's just absolutely tireless and amazing in what she's done, not only for Caltech, but for the community in general. I think many of you appreciate that. But actually seeing her do this day in and day out and encouraging me and dragging me out, even when I think I don't have time, it's not only my love of the cause, but my love of Shelley that makes me try to be a better advocate on campus. And so I'd say Shelley is where is she? Let me see her. Yeah, Shelley.
I'll jump in. Elena, stand up. It's Elena. Elena is our co-leader of our GLBTA affinity group at Owens Corning, and just does an amazing job for our group and for our company in really keeping the conversation one of support and one of sort of business focus. So Elena just does an awesome job.
She's a proud Ohio State Buckeye.
Thanks.
I guess mine would be Phil Wilson. He's the founder of the Black AIDS Institute, and he's been living with AIDS for, I don't know, something like 30 years. And he sort of saw a problem and realized that there needed to be a specific solution. So he works on the problem of AIDS nationally and worldwide, and how it intersects with race. And he's just sort of out and proud, and he's been on Oprah. He's also very sort of good and public and passionate advocate for his cause. Yeah, that's mine.
What about you, Lynn?
Actually, that's a really good question. For me, it would have to be Christine Jorgensen, because I was in high school when she transitioned. And bingo, that was it. I mean, I'd struggled with it for a long time. I knew what I had to do. Of course, it took a little while to finally hook up with Dr. Benjamin and complete that. But that was a very important moment in my life, and just an amazing time. Of course, I never met her, but I owe her a lot, and kind of goes to show you the power of someone just being out there and visible. The impact is huge. You're very leveraged, but I will say that in my own work, I had another role model, not LGBT, but there's sort of an analogy. There's a guy named Charles Steinmetz. I don't know if any of you folks really know who he was, but in the late 1800s, early 1900s, he was really the pioneer of alternating current electricity, which really, in a sense, the knowledge he created and codified in a book he wrote and courses he taught caused the electricity revolution, if you will. And the thing about him was he was a sort of refugee from Europe, had been run out. He was a Jewish guy, socialist, suffered from hunchback syndrome. You know, the sort of person that, were you to look at him, you might think, who is going to hire this guy? Well, the guy was a genius, and he ended up working for General Electric and really made that all happen, and lived a wonderful life and was beloved. So when I was young, I heard about his story, and I thought, you know, if you can do something cool, you're going to make it, you see? And so that's another kind of way of looking at role models. So go check out Charles Steinmetz. He was quite a guy.
I think for me, it was a woman who was almost retired from the physics faculty when I was an undergraduate. Her name was Phyllis Fleming. She is deceased now. She was a professor of physics. She was a lesbian. She was the third woman in the United States to get a PhD in physics. And so when I sort of pieced together all of the things that made her life, I thought, you know, she was an impossibility, you know, standing right there in front of us. You know, I knew her at the end of her career. She was fabulous.
I get to ask a question now. Amy Ross, NOGLSTP out to Innovate. This is for our allies. I think, you know, everybody knows, for those of us who are LGBT, why we get involved with positions and organizations and things like that. But we owe our allies, you know, a tremendous debt for this. So my question is, does anybody ever look at you, particularly non-LGBT people, and kind of scratch their heads and say, why are you doing this? Because we appreciate it in our community, but I'm kind of wondering from your non-LGBT colleagues what the kinds of questions are you get from them, or do you ever have to do any explaining about why you do what you do?
Frank.
Yeah. Early on, when I first got involved in the GLBTA group at Owens Corning, yeah, I got a lot of questions like that. It was a very, you know, learning time in our company, because there was a big conversation sort of in the leadership that started to go down this path of kind of like the religious belief kind of path. At the same time, we were very committed to diversity and inclusion and trying to teach, ethnic, inclusion and diversity, where our conversation there was based on behaviors, not on belief. And so I think very, very early on, I got sort of a lot of challenge, kind of like why are you doing this? And some of it was sort of religious kind of questions, but then as much, and this was sort of the harder part, because I could deal with the religion part. But the harder part was some of what were at that time my bosses kind of, making comments about kind of wasting my time on it. And like why are you, devoting time to this? And so yeah, that was hard. And I don't think I ever had a very good reason for that, other than I just couldn't imagine not. And if it wasn't me, I didn't know who would, because no one else was stepping up.
It's just the right thing to do. People think that I'm a strong advocate because of my sister, but it's give or take my sister, I would do this. It's a struggle between my heart that says it's the right thing to do, and my head that says, if you're familiar with Scott Page's work, Google him, Scott Page, The Difference. His thesis is that you need diversity for any kind of excellence. And that's the argument that I use when I go in front of the straight, white, able-bodied male population, because he's a very smart guy and has a lot of data, and they like that kind of data. But honestly, it's just the right thing to do. And quite honestly, I don't feel that I have to explain myself to anybody. Sorry.
Hi, Carl Street. I'm at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, and we've all talked about your role models within the LGBT community and your mentors that have helped you get to where you are and provide guidance and support. I'm wondering, how do you see yourselves now as mentors for the up and coming STEM generation and LGBT leaders within that, and how do you approach that? And I'm curious, at what point did you notice the transition from you're like realizing I am now a mentor? I'm like, oh my God. So.
Okay, I can start. So I think somebody mentioned this in one of the panels, that all of a sudden you just are a mentor, and there's not any one defining day or week that you switch over from one to the other. And I think you're constantly doing both, right? You're being mentored and you're helping others. For me, the day-to-day stuff is just being visibly out on campus. And so we have safe zone training, for instance, at Caltech, and that allows you to put visible placards up on your door. And that small token, I think, helps at least let people know that there's diversity within my division. I'm very open with my partnership on campus, and actually even within the greater oceanography community. So we go out to sea, and we interact with other labs at other universities, and even with the ship's crew, which frequently are not exposed to LGBT people all that often, and it's been a non-issue, and I think just being out and visible and living your normal day-to-day life speaks volumes in a sort of quiet way. And I know that it makes a difference, because we've had even elementary school and junior high kids of other faculty members who have seen us and have interacted with us as a couple, and they are passionate about LGBT rights, even though, just because they think that we should have as much, in terms of general and equal rights as everybody else. And so I think, just serving as a role model for the next generation also makes a big difference as well.
it's a really interesting question. I think at some point you've done stuff, and so you know how to get stuff done, and then you realize other people ask you, well, how did you do that? And you realize, well, you just do this and this, and you realize, oh my goodness, I think I'm mentoring that person. Because you're sort of sharing sort of your path and encouraging their path for what they want to do. And it just sort of starts happening as you sort of share knowledge of your path with them and assisting them with their path.
Maybe I'll just jump in and say that maybe building a little bit on your comments is sometimes you don't even know you're doing it, right? And you're in a conversation, perhaps being mentored by someone else, and you have an opportunity to mentor, and it's maybe not until you reflect on it that you even realize what just happened, because it's much like many things we've talked about, there's no straight path, and when you think something is done, it's not done. And I think about in our company, from my point of view, language really matters. And one of the things that probably I spend much of my time on is languaging matters when we'll have an award ceremony, and whoever's presenting the awards will thank the spouses and not reference partners. And just when you think you've got that done, then you don't, and it starts over again. And so I think that the mentoring can go both ways, because you can be being mentored by someone that is really technically strong and all that, and then they'll say something that you have an opportunity to say, just let me talk to you a little bit about how what you just said could have been heard or could have been felt. So I think you can go from being mentored to mentoring many times within the same conversation.
And I would just say something else. That mentoring is really important, and it's good if you can document it. One of the programs I work on at NSF in my division is the Presidential Award on Excellence in Mentoring. And one of the requirements of that is to have mentored for 5 years, but to also sort of document sort of what you've done and what the people you have mentored have done. And so a lot of times mentoring is sort of thought of as this informal process that just sort of happens. But I think the recognition and realization that no one gets to where they are without assistance from other people, and sort of making those paths visible is a really useful and important process that we should really all be thinking about. And even if you're not going to apply for the Presidential Award in mentoring, it's still a useful process to really sort of be visible and sort of thoughtful about your mentoring processes.
I'm reflecting a bit. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I'm reflecting a bit on early mentoring experiences I had. When I led a research team at Xerox, I recruited a really brilliant young group of researchers to work on this team. And I think back on that, a lot of the mentoring was implicit in the way we did our brainstorming and the way we coordinated and the way we worked as sort of it'd be like a good blues band or something. Everybody's covering different bases, it all flows, you have some real action when you're on a wild development project, a lot of creative work. People learn from that, and even though, of course, the project ends, everyone goes on, a lot of those folks went on to do great things in their lives, and I think a lot of what they learned there helped them later. But then coming forward in time, did a different kind of mentoring, probably drawing on what I learned from the earlier sort of normal hands-on kind of stuff. In the year 2000 or so, shortly after I came out, I began doing something that kind of went against the grain of the current trans advocacy. There had been a big push to create a sort of public image of sympathy, especially for trans women who were being murdered. This Trans Day of Remembrance issue, which I fully supported. I thought that's great because it was very important to alert people just how bad things were. On the other hand, given the fact everybody thought there's almost no trans women in the world, which of course is an illusion, there are about a factor of 100 more than people in the science community were saying there were, the image created by that was that if you transition, guess what? You're going to become a murder victim because they're counting. I mean, there's all these hundreds of people murdered, and they only thought there's a few hundred out there, so run the numbers. But I knew better. I knew an awful lot of people who had transitioned well, who were successful in their lives, not necessarily rich, famous, and so forth, but had really done well. And I began trying to convince first a handful and then some more to just simply say who they were, tell their stories on a webpage I called Transsexual Women's Successes. And then I had another one, Successful Trans Men. And over a period of a couple of years, I ended up with a few hundred people listed on these pages. Very diverse group all around the world, to the point where I had to stop this and close it because people wanted to be on the pages. But the idea was to just have people tell their stories. You know, no editing, just tell me your story, send some pictures, I'll post it. And I posted them, so I had this huge website with all those pictures. And this was just, you know, in a gut reaction to this media image about victims. And amazingly, I had hit counters on my site. Nobody's ever looking at the site, and all of a sudden, that's what made the site take off. And so, you know, there was mentoring of a form I was doing, but I didn't even realize quite at first that's what I was doing. Then I ended up with people out there. So for many years, I had interacting with people, answering questions, helping people meet some of these people or learn more about them and so forth. And that's how I got involved in the trans advocacy as a kind of mentoring. And so, and in fact, I don't really know many of the people that I mentored. That's like what you mentioned. I just know I've interacted by email with thousands of people. And so the internet was part of the answer. So there's all kinds of mentoring.
Nergis, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Just that it's a continuous cycle. I can in a single afternoon talk to a student or talk to someone and mentor them, and then go to my wise counselors and say, I'm stuck on this, what should I do? So it never ends in both directions.
I always tell the students the day to start mentoring is today. Mm-hmm. I mean, what Kay talked about this morning was that when he was in high school, he didn't have people to talk to. So, yes.
Hi, my name is Andrew Hickam from GE Aviation. So those of us in the STEM field love to envision what the future might be like. So this would probably be a perfect panel to answer this question. This may sound overly confident of me, but I'm already assuming that we will have marriage equality and employee non-discrimination in the very near future.
Those 18 votes count.
Yes,
yes,
they do. So my question is, in a world where that has become a reality, what do you envision being the next big set of challenges that we will tackle in order to improve the quality of life for our LGBT citizens?
Andrew, you stumped them.
Oh. I'd like to try one. I've been very, very impressed with the book Covering by Kenji Yoshino. Many of you probably have read it, where he really, from the standpoint of a legal scholar, really looks at how the law affects things and poses covering, the need to cover, and the way people cover various aspects of their lives as sort of the next frontier in civil rights. And I kind of agree with that. A frontier that isn't, in a sense, about the law, but about things beyond the law where society and culture put pressure on people to hide who they are And if you haven't read that book, it's a wonderful book, and I think it's very thought-provoking and would generate tons of conversations. And in fact, the beauty of it is a lot of our cisgender and heterosexual friends themselves are covering. When you meet anyone, you can ask yourself the question and look for tells. What are they covering? I always play that game, provoke and see what comes. And so and you'll find that people, of course, are covering their religion, they're covering their politics, they're afraid to say anything about either one. Think about it. So they're all covering. And once they start to see what they're doing, you can get them to understand what you are doing or have to do. And so it's a way you kind of tease out what this is all about. Why is it we just can't be ourselves and feel happy about some of the cool things we do without worrying about whether it's politically correct, whether we do it or not? You see? It's, so anyway, I really recommend that book, Covering.
We've got one question over here, please.
Unfortunately, I think we all know we don't live in a world where every heterosexual person is an ally, although I would love to get to that day. At GE, we have a term for those people that no matter how much learning or teaching you do, they're just not going to get it. We call them knuckleheads. So I was hoping the panelists could help describe an approach or maybe a toolkit that you've used when you have encountered one of these knuckleheads in your either academia or industry, and what you did to help diffuse that situation and still be able to get through and get done what you needed to get done in your field.
Yeah, just quickly echo something that I said earlier, that what I'd recommend you don't get hung up in is if the knucklehead that doesn't get it, what is it that they're not getting? It may be that they're not getting that they have the same point of view as you, and that's what diversity is all about. So I would say that, and something that we've tried to do in our company is to really focus on if the knuckleheads are doing, if their behavior is not consistent with your company's values or your personal values, then that's what you have to address, is the behaviors. Don't my view is get into the beliefs thing, or so just focus on the behaviors, and clearly if the behaviors are out of line, knuckleheadish, then there's something to address.
I actually want to go back and address Andrew's question. I mean, it's an interesting question that advocates have been thinking about for a long time. It's this question of formal equality versus social equality. Even if there were all the laws on the books, marriage equality, trans-inclusive, not just a trans-inclusive ENDA, but sexual orientation and gender identity added to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Even that would, so suppose there's formal legal equality in all the laws in all the states and in the federal government, that still wouldn't necessarily address the lives of all individuals growing up in what would still be a heteronormative country. And there are other issues that would impact different aspects of our, different parts of our community differently. So nirvana or the perfect world will not come about just because we get formal equality, though I do think formal equality is at least a very good start. But yeah, so there will always be other issues to deal with. This story actually came up in Connecticut. In Connecticut, they basically got all the formal equality statewide, and then the LGBT group basically said, and they closed. And people were shocked by that, because there was like, well, there's other stuff to do, and just because Connecticut has it doesn't mean that there's lots of other states around Connecticut. But yeah, but some people do feel that once you have formal equality, that the job is done, we have more advocacy to do. But I'm not one of those people.
And really, these two, the knucklehead factor and Andrew's question, are actually kind of related, right? I mean, what I always think of is the normal distribution, And when you get, you know, people, all of us are kind of out here, right? We're out at +3 sigma. We'll do this work no matter what. And then the knuckleheads are down here. You know what I say? Cut them off. We'll never change it. Just get them out of our lives, and because they drain our energy. But I really believe that there's a whole group in there of kind of ± sigma that our work counts towards, that these are people who want to learn. I had somebody come to me, I'm going to sanitize this as much as possible. He came to me last year at a national meeting, and he is a dean of a STEM field at a very large, wealthy private institution. And he told me that when they have the Dean's Advisory Council meeting, the door's shut, and it's all straight white males, and the N-word is allowed to be used anytime they want. And these guys are smoking stogies, and I was gobsmacked. I felt like somebody punched me in the stomach. Really? And he said to me, Mary, can you give me some pearls of wisdom? What can I do? And I said, quit. Run away from there. You'll never change them. Just get away. Wish I had a better answer, but exploding cigars, that's a good one, yes. So with that, I find that we are right at 5 o'clock. We want to make sure that you have enough time to put your feet up and get ready for tonight. So please, let's thank our panel one more time.
Yeah, thank you again. This was really a perfect end to a perfect day. So another round of applause, please, for our speakers. I just want to say that we hope, our hope in taking away here, is that each one of you has found something. And I know as an organizer, and I know from talking to our panelists, we have found something from each of you. It's not a one-way street. As we talked about mentoring, we learn as much from you as we hope you learn from us. So with that, I would like to give my thanks not only to all of you in attendance, our amazing speakers, the staff here at the Fawcett Center, Marcy Reiteman and her staff, our sound technicians, our videographers, most importantly, my boy, JP Karliak. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to TJ for the final remarks.
Someday I'll get to be her boy. We'll see. This has been a great day. I mean, I have had a wonderful time. I have learned a tremendous amount. I thank you all for being here.